Here we are today in Dallas, Texas at Killer Vintage Specialty Guitars. It's located close to Mockingbird and Lemon Avenue. And we're here with Tom Van Hoose, the most interesting person to tell us a lot about the guitar show, guitars, guitar players, guitar luthiers, guitardos.
That's a tall order, Dubber, but I'll be glad to. Why don't we start with the Dallas Guitar Show?
Let's do that. We just had the 40th anniversary of the Dallas Guitar Show this year. Not what, 2 weeks ago.
That's right, and Jimmy Wallace and I are the only two guys that have been to all 40 shows with a booth since the very beginning. So it was quite a party for us, and of course Jimmy owns the Dallas Guitar Show and Music Festival now. But it was a great time there at the show. We met a lot of wonderful people. Got to visit a lot of our friends from years gone by. They're still with us. Got to meet Ted Nugent and talk with him and listen to him play. And the guitar show has evolved from like 10 of us in a room in the Mockingbird Hotel, the Sheraton, to about 300 dealers now in Market Hall. And the genesis of that idea was from Charlie Wurz, who passed away in 1985, who had the idea, after going to gun shows and occasionally finding a guitar or two, let's have a guitar show, he said. Not guns, guitars. And we can do the same thing and buy, sell, and trade and have a good time. That's how I got started. With his partners John Brinkman and Danny Thorpe, they held the first 4 shows from 78, 79, 80, 81 together. Then John parted company with them, and he parted company with Charlie, and Charlie continued the Dallas show up until he passed away in 85. Mark Pollock bought the rights to the show and the shop and Charlie's collection from his widow Carol. And Mark carried the show forward for a number of years. He brought Jimmy Wallace in as a partner in the early 90s. In 1997, the big change came because Jimmy came up with the idea, he sold Mark on it, to make it into a music festival as well as a guitar show. Because Jimmy was so well connected in the music performance industry that he was able to invite many of his friends who are top-level guitarists from all around the country to come and play half-hour or hour sets during the time the show's going on. So that really expanded the scope of the show, and of course the number of public that were coming and so on. And so this 40th anniversary was really special for all of us that have been there for a while.
Well, let me ask you something. How many stages were there in 97? I mean, there are 4 stages now and have been since the past few years that I've known.
There was 3. One outside close to Stemmons, one outside in the back parking lot, a big one, and then a small acoustic one inside the building down at the very end in Market Hall.
Much the way it is now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the first 4 or 5 years, where was it held? I know we've done guitar shows at, of course, Dallas Market Hall and Fair Park.
Yeah. But before that, the first one was at the Sheraton on Mockingbird, and the second
1978.
78, and then it was moved from there. I have to look at the history to be sure. It was moved from there to, let's see, Las Colinas was in 85. I think it was moved not to Fair Park then, that came later, but to a slightly larger venue where you could accommodate more dealers, basically. And it's had quite a history in terms of going from that to Fair Park in the automobile building for many years. And then one year, 2004, I think it was, at the Crossroads Music Festival out there, in addition to the guitar show at a different time, when Eric Clapton and all his best friends came down and played for the Crossroads kind of charity venture. So it has quite a colorful history to it.
You know that big guitar they had up there for the Crossroads?
Yeah.
That now hangs on the ceiling at the Texas Musicians Museum.
How big are that thing is huge.
Yes, it takes up the whole hall.
Well, one of the things that came out of the guitar show for many of us was, what kind of guitars do we love? What do we like to collect? What do we like to play? And I got the bug while I was in graduate school at Southwestern Medical about Super 400s, because Kenny Burrell, my first jazz guitar god, had one, played them, and so I started buying those. And in those days, back in the 70s and 80s, dealers had a hard time selling them. There wasn't much interest in them. So I started buying one and another, and then I noticed that there were some differences in them over the years, from the 30s up through the 70s and 80s. So I got the idea to write a book about the Super 400 guitar. Let me show you a copy of that real quick. It is here. This is the second edition of the book. This came out in 1995. The first was hardcover. But it chronicles the history of this top-line Gibson archtop guitar and Gibson's history in the music business and the association with these big box jazz guitars over the years. So that got me in the collecting bug big time. And I enjoyed doing this book very much. And when I finished the first edition, a collector friend of mine, Scott Chinnery, offered to buy my entire collection of Super 400s, and he did that in 1992. So from that point, I began to collect guitars from different individual guitar makers that made archtops, handmade guitars. And that includes Jimmy D'Acquisto, D'Angelico, who was already deceased, and many other makers. And I discovered along the way there was one person that was really starting to stand out. I mean, a lot. And his name's John Monteleone. And John makes guitars by hand in his shop in Iceland, New York. And I've started collecting his guitars now, and plus Gibson Electrics, which I'll show you in just a minute. But I think John is one of the finest archtop builders there ever has been in the world. He's just at a class almost by himself. And I have one of his guitars today that I'd like to show you all.
Where is he located, or where?
He's located in Iceland, New York. He's a lifelong resident of Iceland. And this is a creation of his done in 1995 called a Radio Flyer. It's 17 inches wide, and it's an acoustic guitar. And it's designed to play all kinds of music. I mean, you can play country, you can play blues, certainly you can play jazz, you can play Django music, and everything on it. It's, but they're so well made that when you start playing them, you just go, whoa, because they sound so good and they play so easy. Or you can play. Play that kind of stuff too. You play any kind of music on these, except classical, and some classical players actually use them sometimes. But John's guitars are exceptionally well made, and they're all made by John by hand. He carves the tops and backs himself, makes the necks himself. Everything on this guitar John makes except for the tuners, basically.
How many does he make at any certain period of time?
He makes about 8 to 10 a year, counting mandolins, which he's also very well known for and very well respected for. So we did a video a few years ago by John Southern. It was called Talking Guitars, and this was done in my home. And this video tells the story of the archtop guitar, basically, kind of the grand tour from the 30s up to now, with me and John demonstrating all these different makers and different types of guitars up to John's guitars that are currently available. I'm a psychologist by profession. I really enjoy working with kids a lot, especially kids going through hard times like divorce, custody struggles, and those things. And so I would keep guitars in my office, little guitars that kids could play on, and they would relax and kind of talk to me then. And then I would, when I had no one to see, I would pick up the guitar and play. And it became very therapeutic for me as well, very relaxing. And that's the beauty of the guitar, really. It's a wonderful personal instrument that you can make your own. You can play anything you want on them. You can learn 5 chords and sing 1,000 songs, or you can go way as far as you want to go, and it's always there. And it's been my friend for a long, long time, just like it is for all of us that love them.
And I can appreciate that.
You betcha. Even as a drummer, right?
Even as a drummer, I've played guitar all my life.
Of course.
And it helps get through some hard times.
It does.
Been through a lot of deaths and a lot of grieving that
Yep.
guitars have helped me through.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, not to be too somber, but one of my favorite electric guitars is right here. And this was Charlie Wurz's favorite guitar. A 1960 Gibson ES355 with factory stop tailpiece. And not to get too esoteric, but these guitars are extremely rare. Gibson made, we estimate, no more than 20 of these from 58 to around 63.
Really?
Because most of these fancy 355s had vibrato tailpieces and this and that. But Charlie loved these thin line guitars, and he was going to write a book about them, just like I wrote mine, about Super 400s. He and I went to Kalamazoo and interviewed all the old fellas there. And after Charlie passed away in '85, I was able to buy this guitar eventually from Charlie's widow, Carol. And I've had it a long, long time. And it's got soul and personality, and when you turn it up loud, it honks. So,
what is this right here? I see some letters. Looks like, I don't know, CW?
CW,
What could that be?
that's Charlie Wurz's initials, and Rene Martinez, who was his luthier at the time, he laid these on the guitar for Charlie.
And Stevie's luthier too.
He was, that's exactly right, till Stevie died.
Right.
Rene went through losing two very close personal friends that were also his employers, and he's done very, very well over the years. Carlos Santana,
Right.
many other folks that he's worked with have been so, and John Mayer, he's traveled with him or worked with him, but yeah, it's the kind of bonds you make in the guitar world, I guess, you know.
Well, did we get a chance to look at that Super 400?
No, we did. Let's bring this up here. This is a '66 Super 400, and this guitar was like the first electric one I ever bought many years ago because Kenny Burrell played one. And like all of us that love our guitar gods, Kenny was my jazz guitar god, and I thought, if I get a guitar like Kenny's, I'm going to sound like him. And yeah, you laugh, but it's true. And not true that I sounded like him, but that's why I bought it.
Right.
And I bought one and more and more, and I just got kind of hooked on them. But what you discover when you buy a guitar that your guitar god plays or endorses, you can find your own voice with them sometimes. If you just stick with it, keep playing and keep learning, and use your ears especially. So I enjoy these very much. I don't sound like Kenny, but I can kind of imitate him, you know. That's fun enough for me.
Well, what are your, I guess, these are your favorite guitars.
These are some of my absolute favorites. You're right. The Gibson thin lines, the 355s, 45s, 35s, sort of course Super 400s,
Right.
and then John Monleone's guitars are the three areas that I really enjoy a lot.
How many guitars do you have now?
My personal collection is not real big, about 25 guitars and about 5 amps. And I also buy, sell, and trade, so I have between 10 and 15 guitars on my website to buy, sell, and trade. So.
What amps? What amps and which ones do you use for
There's
which
two
guitars?
kinds of amps in my book. Fender for tube, and I'm a dealer for Hendrickson amps, which are jazz amps. They make one called the Jazz Amp, and they're solid state, high output, very clean sounding amps that are very small. And I've sold those to a lot of really good players, especially in this area.
Are they combos or heads?
They're combos. They used to make a head, but they don't make one. But they're combos, and they sound wonderful. And Fenders, well, you know how they sound. They sound great.
They do. They
Yeah.
do. When played correctly.
Yes.
Even
Incorrectly, they sound good.
I've been known to pick one up.
Yeah.
Now, as far as guitar collecting goes, you've got a lot of experience with that undoubtedly. Can you give me a little idea of what all that entails? I mean, do you hold on to most of them? Do you collect them to sell them? Tell me.
Well, you can do a lot of that. I mean, when I was collecting Super 400s, when I started out, I was learning as I went.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I did for sure is I learned very early, get really nice examples of the guitars you love. So I didn't get any that were modified or anything, unless I could buy them for resale. I picked up other vintage guitars, some of which I wish I had kept, but I would resell them to buy more Super 400s as I went, until I built up my collection and wrote the book about it. But when you're collecting guitars, the person's actually, you can preserve these really good vintage instruments and take good care of them. And so many collectors will hang on to their guitars for a long time. Some of them are more attentive to their guitars than others because they do take maintenance and stuff. But there's great joy and pleasure in playing these guitars and having your friends come over and we get the guitars out and we all play them, you know, I mean, that's great fun.
So you take them out of the safe?
Yeah, no save. No, we take them out, we play them, and we pass them around to each other. And sometimes I've loaned them to folks to use for gigs or for recording and stuff like that. It's fun. Sometimes you reach a certain point, like I did with my Super 400s, where you've learned so much, and then the book evolved from that. And I felt like I was done at that point. I still love them, but I couldn't learn much more about them. And that's when I put the collection up for sale and Scott Shambury bought them.
93?
92. Yeah. So book came out in 91, he bought them in 92, and I kind of moved on from there. But I had the archtop bug, so I was contacting different luthiers, guys that make them by hand, and asking them to build me this one, build me that one. And so I went through that, and I discovered in that process there's a wide variation of quality and finish and sound and all between what everybody makes by hand. And so through that I learned a whole lot more about how the instrument works, what makes it tick basically. And that's when I began to gravitate, once Jimmy DeQuisto passed away, to John Monteleone and his guitars, because I liked how they ticked. I liked how they were made and how they sounded and so on. So collecting it's a passion. I mean, it's sometimes we get in over our heads. We may pay too much for instruments. We've all done it. And sometimes we turn loose of things that maybe we shouldn't have. When I sold my Super 400 collection, a buddy of mine and I went to Manlin Brothers. That very night after I left Scott Chinnery's mansion, we drove over to Manlin Brothers, and Stan and Larry met us there. They closed the shop. We went out and had Italian dinner, came back, and they had all these D'Angelicos lined up, right? So I bought one, and I bought an L5, and I bought a 1960 Les Paul Standard Sunburst. I never had one. Cherry Sunburst. Gorgeous.
Cherry Burst.
Gorgeous guitar. Paid $20,000 for it. But I had this big check in my pocket. Stan said, we'll float you along until you get your money to me. I sold it 6 months later at the Dallas Guitar Show for $25,000, and I thought I was doing great. Look at this, 25%, in 6 months. Well, that's one I wish I had sold, obviously. But we all do that because the passion that guides us many times is towards certain things we really are more bonded with. And I didn't bond with the guitar. I wish I had, but we learn from those things.
Well, I made a mistake last week and saw a guitar that I really liked, a big box guitar, a Michael Kelly inlaid flames, beautiful guitar, and went home to think about it and research it, and came back the next day to buy it, and it was gone.
But see, that's going to happen, and we can't blame ourselves because you can't know everything about all of them unless you're George Gruen, Right. And even then, sometimes they're kind of utility pieces and they're collectible pieces, as George would say. But sometimes we're going to miss some. But one of Charlie's favorite sayings that stuck with me was Goosey, there's always another guitar. And he would comfort folks, especially me, if I missed one. So that's what we have to learn, whether we're collecting to enjoy them or to use them, hopefully we play them, and share them with our friends and stuff. When the time comes to sell, that's a difficult time. Sometimes people have to sell because they have health issues, or they're getting older and they've lost interest in the instruments, or their kids aren't interested in them, so they need to do something with them, and so forth. There's a lot of that going on right now.
Or being on the road, and needing to send extra money home
to my
wife.
That's
sorry, to the wife.
Yes.
And Mike.
Yes. And your son, of course.
Correct.
He needs money too.
That's right. But those are things you have to do.
That's right. And again, Charlie's wisdom was there. There's always another one. Maybe not exactly like that one you parted with, but there's others. And the beauty of the market, especially in the United States, is there's so many others. Although the nice others, like these, are getting harder to find because people are holding on to them. Right. But the collections do come up for sale, either by auction or individually through dealers, like Dave Henson here at Killer Vintage, whose specialty really is vintage guitars, and the people he knows in the music industry. They come to him very quietly most of the time, and he helps them find the instruments that they want or part with ones they don't need. Those guys perform a great service, the independent dealers. And
then, of course, the big names that come in.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes they do drift in.
Oh, I don't think they drift in. They fly in.
Well, yes.
Right over here.
I did meet Billy Gibbons in Charlie's in the shop in the back, and we had a long discussion about our stop guitars. He was very curious about it, way back. And and I've met other fellows like that do. They have a collection, and they have guitars they use on stage or record with, and they're great guys. And they just want to be treated like regular guys, and the guitar and the music with it becomes kind of a common ground for folks to talk about and relate to.
This has been incredibly educational, interesting, and kind of sad. I hate to walk out of here. I know he does.
You interviewed him,
I did. He hadn't told us everything he's got.
Well, he's not going to.
But he knows what he's doing with them, I can tell you that.
There you go.
Well, this has been great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dubber, so much. It was fun.